Snow was falling like a million knives from the black sky. Jack Dusty Morgan never planned on saving anyone that night, until he saw the little Apache girl staring at him through the wreckage. It was the winter of 1886, the year the frontier nearly froze over. The blizzard roared across the Arizona territory like a beast that wouldn't quit. Jack rode alone through the white void, his coat stiff with ice, his horse snorting steam. Every hoofbeat echoed in the dead silence, as if the land itself had stopped breathing. Jack wasn't heading anywhere in particular. He was just moving, like he always did, chasing nothing but distance from his past. A broken wagon appeared through the swirling snow, its wheels half buried, splintered like shattered bones. Jack pulled the reins, the wind cutting through him as he spotted a shape inside. A woman, blood on her lips, face pale as death, clutching something small to her chest. When he pushed closer, he saw the child. A girl, Apache. Her dark eyes were wide, not with fear, but with the cold that eats you from the inside. Her tiny fingers clutched a silver pendant carved with an eagle. The woman coughed, whispering words Jack barely understood. "Protect her, blood of the chief." Then her hand went still. Just like that, she was gone. Jack froze. Every instinct told him to leave. A white man caught with an Apache child was asking for a bullet. The bounty hunters out here didn't care for good deeds. But something in that girl's stare cut through him like the storm never could. It reminded him of another set of eyes, his daughter's, before the fever took her. He cursed under his breath, low and harsh. Hell's bells, not today. He scooped the child into his coat, pulling her close. She was light as kindling, shaking like a leaf. Jack grabbed the woman's hand one last time, pressing the cold silver pendant into his pocket. He didn't know why, but his chest burned as he muttered, "Lord, if you're still up there, guide my damn fool hands." That choice, taking the girl, would pull him into a storm far worse than the snow. He just didn't know it yet. Jack didn't waste words. He grabbed a broken plank from the wagon and built a crude cross in the snow, marking the woman's shallow grave. The blizzard whipped around him, the wind howling like the ghosts of every man he'd killed or left behind. His horse stamped nervously, sensing the weight of what was coming. Jack mounted up, clutching the girl tighter, her breath barely warm against his chest. He whispered to no one, "You'll be safe, kid, even if it kills me." The leather creaked as he pulled the reins, and they rode into the storm. The sky was black, the land white, and somewhere out there, trouble was already waiting. Men who'd kill for less than this. The storm howled harder as Jack pushed his horse through the frozen dark. The child's head rested against his chest, her breath shallow and uneven. Every few minutes he could feel her trembling ease, then start again, like the flicker of a dying flame. He needed shelter, fast, or both of them would freeze before sunrise. A faint shape appeared through the snow, the silhouette of an old church, abandoned years ago when settlers moved east. Its roof sagged and its windows were broken, but it was standing, and that was enough. Jack kicked the horse gently. "Hang on, kid, we got walls now." Inside, the air was bitter cold, but it was still air. He kicked the door shut, dropped his gear, and went to work. He built a fire from broken pews, sparks dancing like angry fireflies. He set the girl down near the flame, careful not to scare her. She clutched something close, a small dream catcher, the strings frayed but still holding. Her eyes, black as midnight, watched him with a mix of fear and stubborn pride. Jack squatted near her, pulling off his gloves. "Easy now," he muttered, his voice rough but low. He poured water into his tin cup, warming it by the fire. With slow hands, he washed the blood off her face and wrapped her in his coat. She didn't speak, didn't cry, just stared at him like she was trying to read his soul. "Name's Jack," he said after a long pause, though he didn't expect an answer. "You don't need to talk, just stay warm." The firelight flickered on the cracked walls. One of the beams still held an old wooden cross. Jack stared at it for a moment, his jaw tightening. He hadn't set foot in a church since the day they buried his wife and daughter. He remembered standing in the mud, fists clenched, thinking God had turned his back on him. But tonight, he wasn't so sure. Jack pulled the silver eagle pendant from his pocket. The cold metal glinted in the firelight. It wasn't just jewelry. It felt like a key to something bigger, something that might get him killed if he kept holding on to it. He glanced at the girl. She was awake, watching the pendant, her eyes wide. She reached for it, whispering a single word in Apache, a name, maybe, or a prayer. Jack's chest tightened. "This means something to you?" he asked softly. She just nodded, clutching her dream catcher tighter. The wind rattled the church doors. Out there, the world was hunting people like her. Maybe they'd start hunting him now, too. For a moment, Jack's mind drifted years back, to the sound of his little girl's laugh, the smell of apple pie his wife used to make. Then came the sickness, the fever, the graves on the hill. He could still hear his wife's last words. "You can't save everyone, Jack, but save who you can." He blinked, swallowing hard, as if the memory burned more than the cold. Looking at the girl, he saw the same fragile spark he'd once held in his arms, a life worth saving no matter the cost. While feeding the fire, Jack noticed something strange. The pendant had an engraving on the back, old Apache markings. He'd seen symbols like this during the wars. It marked bloodlines, leaders. It hit him then. This kid wasn't just some lost child. She was someone important, someone worth hunting. He could almost hear the horses out there, distant but coming. Men like Garrett Boone, bounty hunters who'd shoot first and brag later, wouldn't stop until they found her. Jack leaned back against the wall, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. "Who's chasing you, kid? And what the hell did they think you saw?" The girl didn't answer, just pulled the dream catcher close and closed her eyes, as if she knew the storm outside wasn't half as dangerous as the storm about to catch up with them. The storm hadn't let up by dawn. The snow was thinner now, but the wind still cut like a knife. Jack knew the old church wouldn't hold them for long. He saddled his horse, wrapped the girl, Naya, in a wool blanket and whispered, "Hang on tight, kid. We're heading to Clara's place." Clara's trading post was a day's ride through frozen trails and half-buried canyons. It was the closest thing to a safe haven in these parts. Jack had known Clara for years, a tough widow with a sharp mind and a sharper shotgun. If anyone would help him, it was her. They rode through the snow-dusted plains, the silence broken only by the creak of leather and the horses breathing. Every so often, Naya coughed softly, and Jack tightened his hold. He tried to tell himself this wasn't his problem. He tried to believe that the smart thing would be to leave the girl with Clara and ride on. But every time he looked down at her tiny hands gripping his coat, he knew that wasn't happening. By mid-afternoon, the dark outline of Clara's trading post appeared on the horizon, a wooden fort against the white emptiness. Smoke curled from the chimney, a promise of warmth. Jack felt a small wave of relief. Maybe, just maybe, things would be easy for once. He was wrong. As he approached, a horseman broke through the fog of snow, tall, lean, with a face carved by hate. Garrett Boone. Jack's jaw tightened instantly. Boone was a bounty hunter, known for his quick draw and his quicker temper. He'd hunted Apache for money, for revenge, and sometimes just for sport.
"Look what we got here," Garrett drawled, riding closer. "Thought I smelled trouble. Dusty Morgan, still playing hero." Jack's hand brushed against the butt of his Colt. "Just passing through, Boone. Don't want no trouble." Boone smirked, his cold blue eyes narrowing. "Funny thing, folks say some Apache brat's been running loose since the army broke up Geronimo's camp. Worth a pretty penny, dead or alive. You ain't seen none, have you?" Jack didn't answer. His silence was enough to make Boone's grin widen. "You're a damn fool if you're harboring one of them," Boone sneered. "They're worth more as scalps than as charity cases." Jack's horse shifted nervously, sensing the tension. Naya pressed her face into his coat, trying to hide. Boone's gaze flicked down, catching the slight movement. His grin twisted into something darker. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Jack's voice was flat, steady, but edged with warning. "Don't. She's just a kid. Ain't your business." Boone leaned forward in his saddle, spitting into the snow. "Ain't my business? Every Apache kid's my business."
"They're like snakes. Kill 'em young or they come back to bite." He nodded toward his men, two Rough Riders emerging from behind the ridge, rifles across their saddles. The odds weren't in Jack's favor, and Boone knew it. "Hand her over," he said coldly. "Save yourself a world of hurt." For a moment, Jack considered it, the smart play, the easy way. But then he saw Naya's dream catcher peeking from under the blanket, swaying like a fragile hope. He felt something inside him lock into place. "Not happening," Jack said, his voice low, final. "You'll have to go through me." Boone's grin faded. So be it. But before things could explode, the heavy door of the trading post creaked open. Clara stood there, her gray hair tied back, her shotgun resting on her shoulder. "If you boys are fixin' to spill blood, do it somewhere else," she barked. "I don't tolerate that kind of business near my place." Jack exhaled slowly. For now, he had a wall and an ally. But he knew this was only the beginning. Clara's trading post smelled of wood smoke and strong coffee. Inside, the fire crackled, melting the ice from Jack's coat. He set Naya near the hearth, wrapping another blanket around her shoulders. Clara's sharp eyes studied the girl. "She Apache?" Clara asked, voice low but firm. Jack nodded. "Found her near a busted wagon. Mother didn't make it." Clara's face softened for a brief second, but then tightened again. "Dusty, you know who's outside, don't you? Boone ain't just another drifter. He's hunting. Word is the Army's paying top dollar for any hostile strays. If he smells blood, he won't quit." Jack exhaled slowly. "She's just a kid." "That don't matter to men like him." Clara knelt, brushing a lock of black hair from Naya's forehead. The girl's dark eyes stared back with a quiet defiance. "She looks like her people's royalty," Clara muttered. Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" Clara motioned toward the pendant hanging from Naya's neck, the silver eagle he'd taken earlier. "That's no trinket. I've seen markings like that during the Apache Wars. That eagle belongs to a chief's bloodline. Some say it's Geronimo's sign." Jack's stomach tightened. If what Clara said was true, the girl wasn't just any child. She was a living piece of history and a target big enough to bring every bounty hunter in the territory. "Boone's been talking," Clara continued, leaning closer. "He claims the Army's looking for Geronimo's kin, not to rescue, to use as leverage or worse." Jack's jaw clenched. He remembered the old stories, soldiers raiding camps, rounding up children, breaking spirits to break the tribes. He looked at Naya, small and fragile, and felt anger burn under his skin. The sound of boots outside broke his thoughts. Boone's voice carried through the walls like a rattlesnake's hiss. "Dusty, don't make me knock down that door. Hand over the red-skinned brat. We can settle this the easy way." Clara's eyes met Jack's. "You know he'll keep pushing. You're standing between Boone and a payday. He's got 2 men with him now, maybe more coming." Jack's hand hovered near his holster. He wasn't eager for a gunfight, not with a child in the crossfire. But there was no way he was letting Boone touch her. Naya stirred, eyes on Jack. She reached into her blanket, pulling out a small pouch made of soft hide. She held it to him with trembling hands. Jack hesitated before taking it. Inside was a folded piece of deerskin with Apache symbols. Clara squinted at it. "That's a message," Clara said quietly. "It's not just a pendant. She's carrying something they want, something her mother died to protect." Jack felt the weight of it, not just the leather pouch, but the responsibility. He looked at Naya, who whispered something in her language, pointing to the symbols. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the plea in her eyes. Outside, Boone pounded on the door. "Last chance, Morgan. Step aside, or I'll burn that place down." Jack slid the pouch into his coat and stood, tall and calm. "Clara, keep her warm. I'll handle Boone." Clara raised a brow. "You sure about that?" Jack gave a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. Not even a little. The heavy thud on the door rattled the walls. Boone's voice came again, sharp and dripping with venom. "Tick-tock, Dusty. You got 30 seconds to open this door, or I'll turn this whole place into a bonfire." Jack stood silent, staring at the door as if weighing every possible outcome. Clara tightened her grip on the shotgun, moving closer to Naya. The girl's dark eyes darted between them, sensing the danger. "You know he'll do it," Clara said, voice steady but tense. "Boone ain't bluffing. He's got kerosene in his saddlebags. One match, and this post goes up like dry hay." Jack's jaw tightened. He had fought his share of men, outlaws, drunks, even soldiers. But Boone wasn't just another troublemaker. Boone had a mean streak and a score to settle. The door shook again, harder this time. "Open it, Morgan," Boone shouted. "I'll give you one last chance. Hand me the girl, and I'll let you live to see another sunrise." Jack's hand hovered over his Colt. He could hear Boone's men outside, murmuring, boots crunching in the snow. They were positioning themselves, waiting for him to slip up. "Dusty, you can't shoot your way out of this," Clara said, keeping her voice low. "Even if you drop Boone, the army will hear about it. You'll be hunted, same as her." Jack didn't answer. He stepped toward the window, peeking through the frost-covered glass. Boone was there, standing tall in his black coat, his pale, scarred face lit by the lantern's glow. 2 riders flanked him, rifles resting against their shoulders. Boone's grin looked carved out of stone. Jack turned back to Naya. She was clutching her dream catcher, whispering something under her breath, maybe a prayer. The sight hit him harder than any bullet. "Lord," Jack muttered under his breath, "I don't know if you're still listening, but if you are, I could use a sign right about now." As if in answer, the wind outside howled and slammed Boone's hat off his head. Boone cursed and stomped closer to the door. "That's it," Boone barked. "You want fire? I'll give you fire." One of his men struck a match, holding it near a rag soaked in kerosene. Clara's knuckles turned white on her shotgun. "Dusty," she hissed, "if we don't stop him now, we'll be roasted alive." Jack exhaled, calm but cold. "All right," he said, stepping to the door. "You want to talk, Boone? Let's talk." He unlatched the door just enough to step outside, the icy wind biting his face. Boone's grin widened like a wolf smelling blood. "There's the hero," Boone sneered. "I'll give you a deal, Morgan. Hand me the brat, and I won't put you 6 feet under." Jack looked Boone dead in the eyes. "You're not taking her."
"Not while I'm breathing." Boone's grin faltered, replaced by a snarl. "Then you just picked your grave, cowboy." The standoff thickened. Snowflakes swirled between them like white ashes. Boone's men shifted their rifles. Jack's fingers brushed his holster, but he knew the odds, 3 against 1. Inside, Clara whispered to Naya, "Stay down, honey, don't make a sound." Jack felt the weight of the moment, the weight of every choice he'd ever made pressing down on him. He wasn't just fighting for the girl anymore. He was fighting for a second chance, a chance to be the man he'd promised his family he would be. The silence stretched between them, cold and sharp as a knife. Boone's eyes glimmered with malice under the lantern light, his hand twitching near his revolver. "You always were stubborn, Morgan," Boone said, his voice low but venomous. "But I've put down men tougher than you. Don't make me add your name to that list." Jack's stance didn't shift. His hand rested loosely near his Colt, his gaze steady. "You try, Boone, but you better not miss." For a moment, neither man moved. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then Boone's man on the left made the mistake of reaching for the lit rag, thinking Jack's focus was elsewhere. That single twitch was all Jack needed. The gunshot cracked like thunder. The matchstick fell into the snow, snuffed out instantly. The rider howled, clutching his arm as Jack's bullet tore through his sleeve. Boone cursed, whipping his revolver free. The trading post door swung open. Clara stepped out, shotgun leveled. "Drop it, Boone," she barked. "I'll scatter your bones across this snow if you don't back off." For the first time, Boone hesitated. He knew Clara wasn't bluffing. "This ain't your fight, woman," he snarled. "It is now," Clara shot back. "You bring fire to my doorstep, I'll send you straight to the devil." But Boone wasn't backing down. He tilted his head toward his remaining man. "Light it up. I don't care what it takes." The second rider swung a bottle of kerosene like a threat. Jack fired again, splintering the post just inches from the man's hand. "Next one goes through your skull," Jack growled. Boone's face twisted with rage. "Fine, you want war, Morgan? You just signed your own death warrant." Inside, Naya crouched near the hearth, hugging her knees. Through the crack in the door, she watched the scene unfold, her small hands shaking. She could hear Jack's voice, cold and sure, as he shouted to Clara, "Get her ready. We're leaving tonight. Can't stay here no more." Clara's face tightened. "You'll never outrun Boone. He'll track you through hell if he has to." "Then we'll make hell come to him first," Jack said, eyes narrowing. Boone finally pulled his men back, but only a few yards. He wasn't retreating, just circling, like a wolf waiting for the right moment. His voice carried through the cold. "You can't hide forever, Morgan. When the storm clears, I'll be back, and I'll bring more men. We'll see how long you can keep that little snake safe." The hoofbeats faded into the storm, leaving only silence and the hiss of wind through the cracks. Jack stepped back inside, closing the door. Clara slammed the bolt, then turned on him. "You just declared war on Boone. Do you understand what that means?" Jack holstered his gun, eyes dark. "I've been in worse wars." He knelt beside Naya, brushing snow from her hair. "We need to move before he does."
This place ain't safe anymore." Clara's expression softened as she looked at the girl. "She's special, isn't she? More than just some runaway." Jack nodded slightly, pulling the eagle pendant from his coat. "She's the reason Boone's out there frothing like a rabid dog. This thing, it means something big, and we need to find out what before he does." The storm had eased by nightfall, leaving the world covered in a white silence that felt almost holy. But Jack knew better. Boone wasn't gone. He was circling somewhere in the dark, waiting for the kill. Jack tightened the saddle straps on his horse, every movement deliberate and quiet. Clara watched him from the doorway, arms crossed, worry carved into her face. "You really think you can outrun Boone?" she asked. "I ain't planning to outrun him," Jack replied, his voice low. "Just need enough ground to get her to safety. After that, if he wants a fight, I'll give him one." He knelt beside Naya, wrapping her tighter in a wool blanket and checking the little pouch she carried. "You stay close to me, you hear?" he said gently. The girl nodded, her small hand clutching the silver pendant like it was her lifeline. Clara handed Jack a small satchel, dried meat, a water flask, and a box of cartridges. "You'll need these more than I will," she said. Jack paused, his gaze meeting hers. "Clara, if Boone comes back here—" "I'll handle him," Clara cut in sharply. "Don't worry about me. Just get that child out alive." The night swallowed them as they slipped out the back door, moving quietly toward the frozen creek that cut through the hills. Jack led the horse on foot at first, leaving no easy trail for Boone to follow. The snow crunched softly under their boots, every sound amplified in the stillness. They hadn't been gone an hour when Jack heard it, the distant crack of a branch, the low snort of a horse. Boone. He was coming faster than Jack expected. "Damn it," Jack muttered under his breath. He lifted Naya onto the horse and climbed behind her. "Hold on, kid. We're about to fly." The mare surged forward, hooves pounding over the frozen ground. The wind tore at Jack's face as he steered them through narrow passes and skeletal trees. Behind them, the faint but unmistakable thunder of other horses began to close in. Jack veered toward Red Rock Canyon, a jagged labyrinth of stone and snow. If they could make it through, they might lose Boone's men in the twists and dead ends. But the canyon was treacherous. One wrong turn and they'd be boxed in. Bullets cracked behind them. Boone's voice rang out, cold and mocking. "Keep running, Morgan. You're just making it fun for me." Jack ducked low, shielding Naya with his body. A bullet whizzed past, striking sparks off a rock. "Hold on," he shouted, spurring the horse harder. They tore through the canyon's narrow throat, snow flying in every direction. Jack knew the land, every bend, every cliff, but Boone wasn't far behind. A rifle shot rang out, striking the saddle horn just inches from Jack's hand. The mare stumbled but kept running. Jack's jaw tightened. He yanked his rifle from its scabbard, twisted in the saddle, and fired a single shot. One of Boone's men went down, horse and all, disappearing into the snow. "Keep pushing," Jack growled, more to himself than anyone else. By the time they reached the far end of the canyon, Jack's breath burned in his chest, and the mare was lathered with sweat despite the cold. He slowed only when the sounds of pursuit faded into the distance. Naya's small hands still clutched his coat, but her eyes were wide with fear and exhaustion. Jack stroked the horse's neck, whispering, "Good girl, you earned your oats tonight." Then, glancing at the girl, he added softly, "We're not out of this yet, kid, not by a long shot." The canyon spit them out into a stretch of moonlit snowfields. The wind had died down, but the night air was sharp enough to cut through bone. Jack spotted a cluster of rocks near a stand of scraggly pines, a natural shelter. He guided the mare into the shadow of a narrow cave, the kind that smelled of old earth and silence. "Easy, girl," Jack murmured to the horse, patting her neck before lifting Naya down. The little one swayed on her feet, exhausted but stubbornly awake. Jack set her near a patch of dry ground and went to gather wood. Minutes later, a small fire crackled, its glow bouncing off the cave walls. Jack rubbed his cold hands, glancing at the girl. She sat cross-legged, her dream catcher resting in her lap, eyes fixed on the flames as if they held answers only she could see. Jack unbuttoned his coat, pulling out the small deerskin pouch she'd handed him earlier. "What's in this, huh?" he said quietly, not expecting an answer. Naya looked up, her dark eyes steady, then nodded as if urging him to open it. Inside was more than he expected, a folded strip of buckskin with markings burned into it. Apache symbols, carved with care. Jack didn't understand them, but Clara's words echoed in his mind. That pendant belongs to a chief's bloodline. Jack traced the markings with a rough fingertip. They reminded him of a map, lines crossing like trails, dots where mountains should be. But there was something else etched near the bottom. An eagle with outstretched wings, and beneath it a series of numbers that didn't look Apache at all. Coordinates, or maybe a code. "Your mama, she died to keep this safe, didn't she?" Jack said, his voice softer now. Naya's lips quivered as she nodded, a single tear sliding down her cheek. She whispered something in her language, a word Jack didn't know, but one that felt heavy with meaning.
Jack leaned back, staring at the cave ceiling. He hadn't felt this kind of weight since the war, when every choice was a matter of life or death. He thought of Boone, of the army, of all the men who'd killed for less than what this map might be worth. "If this is what they're after," he muttered, "we're in deeper than I thought." He took a deep breath, looking at Naya. "Kid, I don't know what all this means, but I swear I'm not letting Boone or any other bastard take you, not while I'm still breathing." The girl didn't speak, but she moved closer, resting her small head against his side. For the first time, Jack felt something stir inside him. Not fear, not anger, but a sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. Outside the cave, the wind shifted. Jack thought he heard distant hoofbeats, faint, like a ghost passing by. He rose and stepped to the cave's edge, scanning the horizon. Nothing but snow and shadows. He whispered, "Lord, if you're watching, keep us one step ahead." Then he looked back at the girl and the strange map in his hand. Whatever it was big enough to kill for, big enough to die for. Jack kicked more wood onto the fire.
"We'll rest here tonight, but come sunrise we ride east," he told Naya. "Somebody out there knows what this means. Maybe your people. Maybe an old friend of mine." For now, the cave felt safe. But deep down, Jack knew it wouldn't last. Boone wasn't done hunting. The morning broke cold and clear. A thin layer of frost covered Jack's coat as he stirred the dying embers of their fire. Naya was still curled up against the warmth, her small face half hidden beneath the blanket. Jack glanced at her, then at the map etched on the strip of buckskin, its markings still gnawing at his mind. "We're running out of places to hide, kid," he muttered. "Time we find someone who can read this better than me." By midday, they reached the edge of the high mesas where the red earth showed beneath the melting snow. Jack spotted a trail of smoke rising from a narrow canyon below. It wasn't Boone. This smoke was controlled, steady, like someone signaling or cooking. Jack hesitated, hand resting on his Colt. "Could be trouble, could be help," he whispered. He guided the horse down the rocky slope, every step slow and deliberate. At the base of the canyon stood a man, tall and weathered, his hair streaked with gray. He wore a buffalo hide cloak, and his gaze was calm but piercing. He didn't reach for a weapon, just watched as Jack approached. "You're far from home, cowboy," the man said, his English accented but clear. "Name's Jack Morgan," Jack replied. "I'm looking for someone who knows these marks." He held up the buckskin map. "Found it with this girl's ma. She didn't make it." The man's eyes softened as he looked at Naya. He knelt, saying something in Apache that made her eyes brighten. She ran into his arms like she'd known him all her life. "Her name is Naya," the man said, rising slowly. "I am Dakota, her uncle. We thought they were lost." Jack handed Dakota the buckskin strip. The older man's expression hardened as he traced the symbols. "These are the trails of our ancestors," Dakota said gravely. "This map leads to the burial ground of our chiefs. Boone wants this, not because he cares for history, but because the soldiers believe there is gold buried with the spirits." Jack's brow furrowed. "Gold? So all this blood just for a pile of metal?" Dakota's gaze was steady.
Men have always killed for less. He glanced at Jack, his tone softer. "But you saved her. That is not something we forget." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't do it for thanks, just couldn't let her freeze." Dakota's voice lowered, like the rumble of distant thunder. "Boone is hunting you. He will not stop. He has gathered more men, and they ride as we speak. If you keep running, they will catch you. But if you stand, perhaps you can end this." Jack looked at Naya. She was holding her dream catcher, watching both men as if trying to understand their words. He thought of all the graves, all the years of running from ghosts. Maybe Dakota was right. Maybe it was time to stop. "Where will we stand?" Jack asked. Dakota pointed toward the mesa ridge where the land narrowed into a single pass. "There, one way in, one way out. You know guns, cowboy. I know these canyons. Together, we can make Boone regret the path he chose." Jack smirked, though his eyes stayed cold. "Sounds like you're asking me to pick a fight." Dakota shook his head. "No, I am asking you to protect what is sacred." Jack took a deep breath, glancing up at the pale winter sky. "Guess it's about time I stopped running. Boone wants a fight, then he's gonna get one." The sun was sinking, painting the mesas with streaks of blood red and gold. Jack stood at the narrow pass Dakota had pointed out, a jagged throat of rock that could choke an army if used right. The wind whistled between the cliffs, carrying the scent of pine and gun oil. Dakota's warriors, only 3 men, but each hardened by years of survival, worked silently, stacking stones and setting up natural traps among the rocks. Jack checked his rifle, loading each cartridge with deliberate care. "Boone'll come heavy," Jack muttered, glancing down the canyon trail. "He's got no spine for fair fights. He'll bring at least 6 guns." Dakota nodded, his weathered face calm but firm. "We will not meet him with numbers. We will meet him with ground and spirit." As darkness settled, Jack moved away from the group, finding a quiet spot near a half-buried cross made of stone, a marker for someone's forgotten grave. He knelt, his hat in his hands. "Lord," he murmured, voice raw and low, "I know I've been gone a long time. Haven't said much to you since my girls left this world. Maybe I blamed you for that. Maybe I still do. But this kid—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "This kid don't deserve what's coming. So if you're still listening, keep her safe. And if someone's gotta take the lead bullet tonight, make it me." When he rose, there was no lightning, no sign. But for the first time in years, Jack felt something shift in his chest. Not peace exactly, but a kind of clarity. He returned to the fire where Naya sat with Dakota, the girl's eyes reflecting the flames. She was clutching her dream catcher again. Dakota was telling her something in Apache, his tone gentle but solemn.
She says you're like the eagle on her pendant, Dakota translated, looking at Jack. You came when the storm was darkest. Jack shook his head with a rough chuckle. Don't go painting me as some hero. I'm just a fool with a gun. Dakota's gaze was steady. Sometimes that's exactly what a hero is. Jack squatted beside the fire, drawing a rough map in the dirt. Boone'll come straight down this trail. We'll block him here and here, he said, pointing to the narrow choke points. I'll take the high ridge with the rifle. Dakota, you keep Naya behind those rocks. She don't move until I say so. And if Boone tries to flank, one of Dakota's warriors asked. Then I'll show him why they call me Dusty, Jack replied, a hint of grim humor in his tone. As the night deepened, the fire burned low. Jack checked his revolver one last time, then looked at Naya. She was already asleep, curled up under a blanket, the dream catcher hanging above her like a silent guardian. Jack whispered, almost to himself, "Tomorrow, kid, we end this." Dakota stepped beside him, laying a hand on his shoulder. No fear. The Great Spirit walks with those who protect the innocent. Jack nodded, staring into the night. He could already feel Boone's presence on the wind, like a storm waiting to break. The morning came quiet, too quiet. A pale mist clung to the canyon floor, and the air was sharp with the smell of frost and gunpowder. Jack lay flat on the ridge, rifle steady, eyes scanning the narrow trail below. Every nerve in his body hummed with tension. Boone was coming. He could feel it. Dakota and his two warriors crouched behind stone outcroppings, their bows ready.
Naya was hidden further back, peeking from behind a rock, clutching her dream catcher like a talisman. Jack gave her a small nod, the closest thing to a promise that she would be safe. The sound of horses echoed down the canyon, steady, menacing. Boone's voice carried over the wind, mocking and cold. "Dusty Morgan, I know you're up there. Hand over the brat, and I might let you keep breathing." Jack smirked grimly, adjusting his scope. "Right where I want you." Boone rode into view, black coat flapping like the wings of a vulture. 5 riders followed, rifles across their saddles. Their breath fogged in the cold air as they scanned the cliffs. "Where's that coward hiding?" Boone muttered. Jack waited. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then he fired. The crack of his rifle split the silence, and Boone's lead rider tumbled from his horse, landing hard in the snow. Chaos erupted. Boone cursed, ducking as his men scrambled for cover. Arrows from Dakota's warriors whistled through the mist, striking another rider's hat clean off. "Son of a, spread out!" Boone roared, diving behind a boulder. Bullets ricocheted off the ridge where Jack lay. He slid back, reloaded, and rolled to a better angle. "Boone!" Jack shouted, his voice carrying like thunder. "You came all this way for 1 kid? That's all you're worth?" Boone's laugh was sharp and bitter. "She ain't just a kid, Morgan. That girl's worth more gold than you've seen in your miserable life. You think you're protecting her? You're just making it worse for her and you." Jack fired again, forcing Boone's men to scatter. "You want her?" Jack barked. "Then come get her yourself." A bullet whizzed past Jack's ear, close enough to make him grit his teeth. Boone's men were closing in on both sides, trying to flank the ridge. Dakota let out a sharp whistle, signaling Jack. "2 coming from the west," Dakota shouted. Jack spun, spotted the movement, and fired twice. 1 man fell, but the other ducked behind cover. Bullets kicked up dirt near Naya's hiding spot, and Jack's heart lurched. He scrambled down the rocks, yelling, "Stay down, kid!" Boone's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Morgan, stop playing soldier. You can't win. Give me the girl, and maybe I'll let you crawl out of here." Jack reached the ground, his revolver spinning in his hand.
He glanced at Dakota, who gave him a grim nod. "He's coming," Dakota said. Jack exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. "Good. I'm tired of running." The gunfire paused for a heartbeat, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Boone stepped out from behind the boulder, gun in hand, his cold blue eyes locked on Jack. "Let's finish this," Boone growled. The canyon was deathly still, broken only by the faint hiss of wind through the rocks. Boone stood in the open, his black duster flapping, revolver aimed steady at Jack. His scarred face twisted into a grin that showed no warmth, only the promise of violence. "Well, look at you, Morgan," Boone said, his voice dripping with mockery. "All that talk about running cattle and staying out of trouble, and here you are, ready to die for a redskin brat." Jack's stance was solid, his revolver resting loosely in his hand. "I don't care what you call her. She's just a kid. She's worth more than every rotten piece of silver you've killed for." Boone tilted his head, sneering. "You think you're some kind of savior? You're a washed-up cowboy who drinks too much and talks to ghosts. Ain't no redemption for men like us." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Maybe not. But I'll be damned if I let someone like you decide who gets to live." Boone chuckled, dark and bitter. "Fine words, Morgan, but words don't stop bullets." They circled each other, boots crunching on gravel. The canyon felt like a coffin closing in. Dakota's warriors stayed still in the shadows, bows drawn but waiting for Jack's signal. Naya peeked from behind a rock, her small face pale but determined. "Hand her over, and I'll let you walk away," Boone said. "Hell, I'll even let the Injuns bury their dead without spilling more blood." Jack gave a short, humorless laugh. "I'm not handing over anything. You want her? You gotta get through me." Boone's smile faded. So be it. The world seemed to stop as both men moved. 2 gunshots cracked almost as one, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. Jack dove behind a boulder, feeling the heat of Boone's bullet graze his sleeve. He rolled, came up on one knee, and fired again. Boone ducked, his hat flying off as a bullet chipped the rock beside him. "Damn you, Morgan!" Boone snarled. He fired twice, forcing Jack to crawl lower. Dakota loosed an arrow that clipped Boone's shoulder, spinning him slightly. Boone screamed, rage boiling over. "You're dead, all of you!" Jack popped out from behind cover, firing 3 shots in quick succession. One hit Boone's revolver, sending it spinning into the dirt. Boone staggered, clutching his bleeding shoulder, but he didn't fall. Instead, he lunged forward like a wounded wolf, tackling Jack to the ground. The 2 men hit the dirt hard, fists flying. Boone's strength was brutal, every punch fueled by years of hate. Jack blocked, countered, his knuckles cracking against Boone's jaw. Blood sprayed across the snow. "You can't win," Boone hissed, hands tightening around Jack's throat. Jack's vision blurred, but then he saw Naya standing just feet away, clutching the silver eagle pendant. Her wide eyes locked on him, and something inside Jack snapped back to life. With a roar, he twisted, breaking Boone's grip, and slammed his elbow into Boone's ribs. Jack grabbed a nearby rock and swung it hard, knocking Boone off balance. He rolled to his feet, revolver back in hand. Boone staggered, reaching for his fallen gun, but Jack was faster. "Don't," Jack said, voice like steel. Boone froze, chest heaving, hate burning in his eyes. Jack aimed steady, ready to end it. For a long moment, neither man moved. Boone stood there, breath ragged, his fingers twitching inches away from his revolver lying in the dirt. Jack's gun didn't waver. The canyon was so quiet you could hear the wind whispering through the cracks in the rocks. "Go on, Boone," Jack said coldly. "Reach for it. Give me one good reason to end this." Boone's sneer returned, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "You ain't got the guts, Morgan. You've always been soft. That's why your family's in the ground, and you're just a ghost playing cowboy." The words hit Jack like a punch to the gut, but he didn't flinch. He tightened his grip. "You don't talk about them." Before Boone could move, a deep voice rang out from behind the rocks. "Enough!" Dakota stepped forward, flanked by more Apache warriors who had silently arrived from the ridge above. They carried bows and rifles, their faces calm but resolute. The sudden presence of at least 10 warriors changed the air in an instant. Boone's men froze, glancing nervously at one another. Dakota's voice carried like a drumbeat. "This land has seen enough blood. Leave the girl, leave this canyon, or none of you will see another sunrise." Boone's face twisted with anger. "You think you can scare me with feathers and paint?" He turned slightly toward his men. "We ain't backing down. Not for them, not for him." One of Boone's own men shifted uneasily, lowering his rifle. "Garrett, this ain't worth dying for." Jack kept his revolver steady. "You heard him, Boone. This ends here. Walk away, and maybe you'll live long enough to drink another bottle of cheap whiskey." For a moment, Boone looked like he might lunge again, but then he saw something in Jack's eyes, a fire that hadn't been there before. Maybe Boone realized this wasn't about gold or pride anymore. This was about a man who'd decided he had nothing left to lose. Boone spat into the snow. "Fine, keep the brat, but this ain't over, Morgan. Not by a damn sight." Dakota's warriors tightened their circle, arrows ready. "It is over," Dakota said flatly. "Go, before we change our minds." Boone glanced at his injured men and cursed under his breath. Slowly he backed away, hands raised. His men followed, defeated, their boots crunching in the snow. Boone mounted his horse, shooting one last glare at Jack. "Next time, Morgan, I won't be so kind." "Next time," Jack said evenly, "you better aim straight." With that, Boone and his gang disappeared into the canyon shadows, their hoofbeats fading into the distance. Jack lowered his revolver, exhaling slowly. Dakota approached, his gaze steady. "You fought with honor, Morgan. Few men would stand for a child that isn't theirs." Jack holstered his gun, glancing at Naya. "I reckon she's everyone's kid now, and she deserves better than men like Boone." Dakota placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "There is a strength in you, cowboy. Perhaps the Great Spirit brought you here for more than just this fight." Jack didn't answer, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel like arguing with that idea. The canyon grew quiet after Boone's gang vanished into the horizon. All that remained was the smell of gunpowder and the faint echo of hoofbeats. Jack holstered his revolver and looked around at the scattered shells, the churned snow, and the girl standing close to Dakota. For the first time since this storm began, Jack felt a strange weight lifting from his chest. Dakota's warriors moved silently, collecting arrows and helping one another tend to their wounds. One of them handed Jack a strip of cloth soaked in herbal medicine. "For your knuckles," the man said in broken English, nodding with respect. Jack gave a slight smile, wrapping his bruised hands. By afternoon, Dakota led Jack and Naya through a hidden trail that wound deep into the red mesas. When they reached the Apache camp, a group of elders stepped forward, their faces lined with years of hardship. A woman with silver-streaked hair, adorned in a blanket woven with sacred patterns, came forward. Dakota bowed his head slightly. "This is White Feather, the grandmother of Naya. The girl is home now, thanks to you." Naya ran into White Feather's arms, clutching her dream catcher. The elder woman's eyes glistened with tears as she whispered words of gratitude. She turned to Jack and spoke through Dakota. "She says the spirits will remember your courage. You brought warmth where there was only cold." Jack looked away, feeling awkward under the weight of her gaze. "I just did what anyone should have done," he muttered, though deep down he knew not everyone would have made the same choice. The tribe offered Jack food and a place by their fire that night. As the flames crackled, Jack found himself listening to Dakota's stories, tales of their ancestors, of battles and survival, of faith in the Creator who watches over all. Something in those words reached a part of Jack he thought was long dead. Later, as the camp quieted, Jack sat alone under the stars. The night sky stretched endless, filled with 1,000 tiny fires. He took the silver eagle pendant from his pocket, running his thumb over its worn edges. "Lord," he murmured softly, "I reckon I don't know what you got planned for me, but tonight, for the first time in years, I ain't angry about it." Dakota approached, handing Jack a hand-woven blanket. "For you," he said, "it carries our blessing. Wherever you ride next, may it remind you of what you protected." Jack accepted it, feeling the weight of more than just wool. He realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't just drifting. Saving Naya had given him something he'd lost long ago, a reason to keep going. The next morning, the sun rose pale and quiet over the mesas, turning the snow into fields of gold. Jack saddled his mare while Naya stood nearby, holding her dream catcher. She didn't say a word, but her eyes followed him, dark and full of something he couldn't name. Gratitude, maybe, or the kind of trust a child gives only once. Dakota walked over, his hand resting on Jack's shoulder. "You could stay, Morgan," he said calmly. "This land needs men who understand both sides." Jack gave a faint smile and shook his head. "Men like me don't stay put, never been my way. Besides, she's got you, and that's better than anything I can give." Dakota didn't argue. Instead, he said, "What you did here will be told around fires long after you're gone. Not because of the fight, but because you saw past what others fear. You saw a child." Jack crouched down, looking at Naya. "You be strong, little one, stronger than me. You hold on to that dream catcher. It'll remind you of your ma and of this old fool who just tried not to mess things up." Naya reached out and hugged him. For a moment, Jack froze. Then he placed his rough hand gently on her back. When she let go, she handed him a small bead from the string of her dream catcher, as if giving him a piece of her courage. "Thank you," he whispered, tucking the bead into his pocket. As Jack mounted his mare, he looked back one last time at the campfire smoke curling into the clear sky. He thought about the last few days, the storm, the blood, the fear, and how a small girl had reminded him that courage wasn't about winning gunfights. It was about choosing kindness when the world gave you every reason not to. Somewhere deep inside, he felt the quiet presence of God again, not like a voice, but like the warmth of the sun cutting through the cold. Jack tipped his hat to Dakota and Naya. "Keep riding, keep dreaming," he said. Then, with a click of the reins, he rode off toward the horizon. The new blanket draped over his saddle and the silver eagle pendant glinting at his chest. Behind him, the wind carried the sound of Dakota's voice, soft but steady. "Sometimes the smallest act of mercy can change the course of many lives." And for the first time in years, Jack Morgan believed that might just be true. Some say the West was tamed by guns and grit, but I believe it was saved by moments like this. Small mercies, quiet courage, and hearts willing to see beyond fear. If this story moved you, join us for more true Wild West stories where forgotten souls still whisper through the dust.